All right, student math community, in this video we are going to talk about the process of multiplying and dividing integers. And as I said before, many students I find when they are in an algebra class are not having algebra problems. They are lacking confidence in their arithmetic. And even having the ability to use a calculator does not alleviate that anxiety. Best thing you can do is practice and get good and quick at your arithmetic operations. In a previous module, we practiced our multiplication tables, and that is a great way to gain confidence. And so now we're going to take it to the next step, and we're going to talk about integers. So the first thing I just want to remind you is, what is an integer? An integer is a set of numbers that contains two things. Okay, the first thing that we have is, let me get my pen ready. I thought it was ready, so I'm a little behind the game here. Sorry about that. So what an integer is it's a number that is in the following set. First, we have our whole numbers, which we are used to working with. So 0 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And you can list forever and ever, but instead of doing that, we write 3 dots. That's called an ellipsis. And what it means is to keep following the same pattern. So we will do that. Then the integers also contains the negatives of those numbers. So now we can go backwards, -1 and -2 and -3. And I didn't leave myself a lot of room, so I'm going to put an ellipsis here going backwards. And so those are the integers. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about multiplying and dividing them. In the next lesson in the student math community, we are going to talk about adding and subtracting. The rules for multiplying and dividing are relatively simple. Remember, simple does not mean easy. Simple just means that it's not complex, and they go like this. So for multiplication, if you multiply, which we already know, if you multiply a positive number times a positive number, that gives you a positive. Similarly, if you multiply a negative number times a negative number, that gives you a positive. So to make that simpler to remember, if you have two numbers of the same sign, okay, so if you have two numbers of the same sign, then you get a positive outcome when you multiply. If you have a negative number times a positive, or if you have a positive times a negative, the order is unimportant. Either way, that leads to a negative result. And the same thing is true for division. Okay, so if you have a positive and then I divide by a positive, that is going to be positive. Same thing if you have a negative number divided by a negative. So I don't know that that notation looks perfect, but that is going to equal a positive as well. And then if you have a positive divided by a negative, or a negative divided by a positive, both of those are going to be equal to a negative value. The rules are straightforward. Does not matter the size of the number. It does not matter the order of the number. So here's just a few quick examples. Again, if you've done your multiplication tables, this should not be too big of a deal. So my first example is -5 times 9. And when I multiply that, 5 times 9 is 45. And then you notice I have a negative times a positive, so it's a -45. -3 times -8. Well, again, multiplication tables. 3 times 8 is 24. And since I have a negative times a negative, that is going to be a positive 24. And in the case of multiplying our values, we don't write the plus sign for positive. And then I have a 7 times a -11. Again, 7 times 11 is 77, and that is going to be -77. For the division, same thing. I have a -64 divided by a positive. A negative divided by a positive is always a negative, and 64 divided by 4 is 16. And last but not least, -18 divided by -9. Negative divided by a negative is positive. 18 divided by 9 is 2, so positive 2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the screen forward. I've got several more problems. I want you to pause this video, and I want you to take 60 seconds to 90 seconds, and I want you to complete these problems. So pause the video. Welcome back. So hopefully this is what you've gotten. -3 times -12, that's two negatives. That makes a positive 36. 13 times -2, that is a negative 26 because we have a positive times a negative. Negative 8 times negative 4, a negative times a negative is a positive 32. And then negative 10 times 7, a negative times a positive is negative 70. Same rules for division. A negative divided by a positive is a negative 9 on the first problem. A negative 54 divided by a negative 9, negative divided by a negative is positive 6. And last but not least, a positive 100 divided by a negative 25 is negative 4. There's a worksheet linked below this. It's great for practice. Get good and quick, and practice, practice, practice. That's the best thing you can be doing. Good luck.